Will Nitze is building a $125 million business that he projects to end the year at 17% bottom line margin. That is up from 59 million at a 13% bottom line last year. That is off the back of a couple fundraising rounds, some of those things. So he has fully gone from fundraising to profitable and to continuing to grow at an absolutely monster rate. If you didn't catch that, that is doubling the business from 59 million. It's very hard to keep growing a business that fast and that aggressively at that stage. But Will's done it, which makes him a bona fide profit monster. And therefore, this is another one of the Profit Monsters interviews on my show where I'm talking with operators and founders of brands building mid-8 figure, early 8 figure, mid-8 figure plus brands, putting up real profit so you can learn how to do the same. We're going to get into it with Will Nitze from IQBAR and how he's building a food and beverage monster. Let's get into it. Hey, Will, thanks for taking time to do this. I appreciate it, man.
Good to be here.
All right, let's just go straight for it. There's something that I noticed about your story that is different than what is, I think, common advice right now in D2C and in e-commerce. There's a big push against raising money. And the logic goes something like this. Raising money forces you into growth behaviors that will never be profitable, basically, and therefore destroys any chance, because enterprise value in e-commerce businesses and in retail businesses, let's just say, not just e-commerce because it goes beyond channels, but e-com first, we'll say businesses selling retail, CPG, food and bev, any of those kinds of things, that you have to be profitable to generate enterprise value for the business. I think probably we agree about that, though correct me if I'm wrong. That the profit has to be there. And so what people say is the problem with raising money is it obligates you to a bunch of behaviors that are not going to generate profit because you have to grow too fast and too aggressively, and typically fly right through profitable customer acquisition and never have profitable customer acquisition and therefore never have a chance. That's how the narrative basically goes for people. I have certainly seen a couple of businesses that I've worked with that have worked out extremely poorly, partly fitting that narrative directly, that they just couldn't satisfy the growth demand at a CAC that made sense for their businesses. At IQBAR, you raised a bunch of money. I would love for you to talk about that a little bit, and sort of a bunch, quote unquote. I mean, yeah, you could define what a bunch is, but I'd love for you to talk about that and really why you think that it is a bad idea to bootstrap. And so maybe tell us a little bit about your story at IQBAR, and then let's kind of bring the conversation back to your position on that, because I'm really interested to hear what you have to say here.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea inherently. It's just, it's bad to be dogmatic about it. I think you have to look at everything from first principles. And for example, you were saying things like it forces you into certain growth. Well, it only forces you into it if it forces you into it, right? Which is downstream of who you're raising money from, what valuation you're raising at, what the mandates are from that third party, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I really do think it's as simple as looking at things from first principles. So you're starting with a category. Every category is way different, right? They have different unit economic profiles. They have different total addressable markets, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have to decide a few things up front, and then that will dictate whether you bootstrap or don't. And it will also dictate many other things, which is like, what is my baseline gross margin? What is my goal for this asset? And how fast do I want to grow? And there are a couple other things, but like those are the big ones. And so for a protein bar company, your gross margin is quite bad because it's a total volume game to start. And then it gets really, really good at roughly 30 million units a year. For other people, it might be 20 million, 40 million, whatever.
Sure.
But this is,
but that principle applies across industries.
Yeah, and
volume matters.
Yeah, like this is like relatively true if you're making a cookie or a bar, right, or even certain beverages or whatever. There's like this magical level of, again, call it 30 million units a year where your unit economics get much, much better. And then they get really good at 100 million units a year. And so your question really that you're working backwards from, or I was working backwards from, is how fast can I get from 0 to 30 million units? And it just so happens that I got the answer to that. And then one of the outputs of that answer is you need money to get there. And like we're not selling perfume at 97% gross margins. We cannot grow fast to get to that 30 million units without raising outside capital. I mean, it just is what it is. There's no way around it. And so then the question becomes, how do you raise in the best possible way at the best possible valuation that you can grow into, and yada, yada, yada. So you make that binary decision. I'm a fool to not raise money. And is it possible to slow grow it? Yes, like technically that is possible. It's just super unadvisable. And I think people don't realize that you can raise at really good terms. People think about raising as it relates to VCs, and really you should reorient your preconceived notions on raising as it relates to angel investors, which are just rich people. Like that is all they are. And so it's like, can I find 10 rich people to write me a $50,000 check? And can I do that on a safe note, simple agreement for future equity? So I'm not even actually creating a hard and fast priced round. And will those investors be patient? And da, 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 da. And so if you can check all those things, well, it's not free money, but it's like unencumbering money. And if that then allows you to grow 4 times faster, then you're a damn fool to not raise that money.
Yeah. I mean, I think like one of the things I've said to some folks who have brought up this conversation is like, at some point, even if the way businesses get valued changes from the day you raise to the day you are looking towards an exit, ultimately your investors just want the most money back, right? So like, so it may be that like raising in the environment today is just for a retail, again, CPG, food and bev, any of those kinds of brands, like it just may be that it's a really different proposition than it was 5 years ago when people were still kind of, at least then, thinking about sort of the revenue-based valuations and some of that stuff in the sort of maybe, I don't know, D2C 1.0 phase. That would have been the tail end of it still. But that I think, and so to your point, right? Like the idea is just that like if you find people aligned with what you think is true about the way the market values businesses and then get them to put money towards that goal, it makes all the sense in the world. And I think that's a good pushback, because I do think that like there is now sometimes in some circles of some of the like sort of D2C land, a sort of overt like, yeah, raising is bad. Bootstrapping is good, raising is bad. Bootstrapping, bootstrapping forces you into better behaviors, et cetera. And I think your nuance on that is really good. I'm curious if you think, if you have if you would state that any more strongly in relation to bootstrapping specifically, like maybe outside of food and bev, because I think the margin dynamic you're talking about in food and bev is somewhat unique to food and bev, in that like every brand gets economy of scale with larger production. Manufacturing is a volume business, so for them to make money, they got to make a lot of stuff, and therefore they can give you more, all those things. But I do think there's probably uniquely a dynamic there in food and bev. I don't know, that could be wrong, but I'm curious if in general you would say anything more sweeping about bootstrapping, like, or if you're like, nah, it just depends on the person and the business and the goals.
No, I think it's a badge of honor, which is super silly because that's an ego thing. It's an ego thing. It just is. Yeah. And I think, look, if you're Sean at Ridge Wallet, right, and you're making, I don't know what his COGS are. Let's say they're $5 and he's selling that for $95. Like that is just such all the vast bolus of his expenses are going into marketing and acquiring customers, not the COGS piece of the equation. My business is extremely different because the COGS piece of the equation is such a bigger portion of our total expenses, right? And so I have to get to that, let's say 30 million units a year to cram the COGS piece down, and Sean doesn't. And so those are just such different models inherently that yes, I do think context is incredibly important, because he can survive off of operating cash flows because he has such a good gross margin out the gate. But my case, I do think is quite consistent for the vast majority of food and bev customers, because we play in ultra competitive markets. I mean, go to the grocery store and you can plainly see that. Like there are 500 yogurts, there's 500 bars, there's 500 bottles of water, like et cetera, et cetera.
And they're all right next to each other and priced similarly a lot of times, Yeah.
And so you just plain can only charge so much for a bar or a cookie or a fill in the blank. And so how do you expand gross margin? It's just volume. How do you get volume? You need money and you need to move really fast. The key is get to that volume as quickly as possible such that you can flip profitable. Like, make no mistake about it, the ultimate enterprise value is a derivative of your EBITDA, which is the only way to get there is to get profitable. And so, it took us 5 years. I think we lost roughly $1 million a year for 5 straight years. And then we flipped profitable in our 6th year. And then now we're in our 7th year and we're substantially profitable. But it took 5 years of losing money. And by the way, I wouldn't do it any other way. Yeah. Like, if we had bootstrapped, we'd be at, 1/10 the revenue. So we sold half the business to get 10x the revenue. Again, you would be an absolute fool to not make that trade.
If you are building an e-commerce business for profit, then there is no tool like INTELLIGEMS to help you maximize the profit you are generating with every visitor who comes to your site. That is because INTELLIGEMS is not just CRO software. INTELLIGEMS is software built to help you test the real needle movers on your site. Things not just like regular split tests, but like the actual price of your products, live split testing that, the offer, the shipping threshold, things that make a huge impact on how people interact with your product on your site. And as they do that, you measure all of it, not just by conversion rate, not even just by AOV, but profit per visitor. INTELLIGEMS ties in to your product data so you can know exactly how much contribution margin, how much gross profit you are generating for every user that comes to your site. And let me just tell you that there are major wins to be had on your website by doing this well. I've seen it repeatedly because my clients, many of them, use INTELLIGEMS and have continued to use it over time. INTELLIGEMS is also fast and easy to install. You don't need a developer or anything like that. If you are on Shopify, it is a smooth, quick addition to your site. You can get testing today. I've talked to brands who have done like 3 years of repeated, ongoing price testing on their products. A brand of mine has constantly tested both price of products and the main offers on their site, like the 10% off that you offer to new customers versus larger stack discounts for new customers. If you think there might be different ways where you can create offers and across product pricing, site-wide new customer offers, returning customer offers, shipping thresholds, those kinds of things that can meaningfully impact your customer journey. And trust me, there are ways to do that. You should be using INTELLIGEMS to do all of it. Go to intelligems.io and use the code FARIS20, FARIS20. And that's FARIS20 to get 20% off your first 3 months. Get started with INTELLIGEMS. To me, it's one of the core pieces of software that smart growing e-commerce brands should be using to operate with a profit-first mentality. Check it out today, intelligems.io. Yeah. Do you feel like just to break that down a little bit, when you went to capital markets basically to raise, like, do you feel like at the time, what you are articulating now was what you articulated then? At least something like that story. Were you pretty clear-eyed about that sort of thing? And what I'm really getting at is, and therefore, is this the story that you had told your investors? Do they feel like aligned to the sort of way you were approaching it? Because I think that this is like a common problem with people who raise is, at least the way I hear it, is like, you'll hear people say things like, oh, my investors, I want to do this, but my investors want me to do that, And so I'm just curious, like, how much that has been about you charting a course and then roughly following it. Of course, over 7 years, things change. Like, I'm sure there's been changes, but yeah.
Investor selection is like critically important. So let's say you flip the binary, I'm going to raise money. Okay, cool. Investor selection is really important. It's really important for me, and I still control the company. I own more than half of the stock, but it's still important. But then it gets insanely important if you're ever going to dilute yourself down to below half ownership. So what are they betting on? They're betting on you. Like that is, it's a sort of trait to say that, and that's a trope and whatever, but that is absolutely true. And so, Do you have to tell romantic stories about where this can go? Yes, but that's just entrepreneurship and raising money. But ultimately, they're betting on you because it's a 10-year journey. Like on average, to get to a really great exit, it is 10 years. And everything will change about your business, your product set, your go-to-market, et cetera. And so they're betting on you. And then the last thing I would say is, you don't want desperate investors. That is the worst investor. You don't want some person who's putting in 20K and that's the last 20K they had, and they're betting on the river card. And if you don't work out, they're going to be knocking on your door in 3 years. Like, you want people who don't need your investment to work out. Like, if you went to zero, they'll still take your phone call. So just act accordingly. Right now, those people are hard to find, and you have to be shameless and you have to network into them. And heck, maybe it's your dad. I don't know. Everyone has different circumstances, but that is the investor you want. And that's just a different way of saying, like, patient and hands off. Because yeah, all of the horror stories you hear are like the inverse of that. They're not patient. They're not hands off. They think they know how to run the business better than you, even though in most cases they've never operated a business like yours. But that's where the horror stories are.
Yeah. That's helpful. Do you think that, well, I want to come back to something you said about your product earlier and the margin profile of the product. Can you talk more specifically about those margin markers in the sand? Like, so you said in the beginning you were at X margin, and then at 30 million units you get to, whatever percentage of X margin, and on down to 100 million. Like, how big is that swing in protein bars, for IQBAR?
It's gigantic. So, and this is something I learned as I went and just got better and better and better and better at. But I think a lot of people will, I don't know, if you're like in a drop shipper mentality, you're like, I'm going to buy this finished good, I'm going to mark it up, and I'm going to sell it to someone at some margin. Like, that is not my world. My world is I'm inventing stuff from scratch. And that stuff has X number of inputs. And so for us, let's say it's 20 inputs. When you start, generally how it works in food and bev is it's like a turnkey model. That's what it's called. And the contract manufacturer that makes your stuff is buying all those inputs. They're buying the 20 things. They're marking all of them up somewhere between, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5%, maybe even 10%. They're making the finished good, and then they're selling the finished good to you at an additional markup. And so they're making margin in both places. It's kind of like 3PLs where they're marking up the shipping costs, and then they're also charging you to ship the parcel. And so that is generally how people start. Over time, once you get volume, so by the way, that's the materials. They will then on top of that charge what's called tolling, which is just a labor fee per unit. Over time, you will reach a crossroads where you can stick with that model, or you can take things in-house. So instead of the contract manufacturer buying all those inputs, you are buying all those inputs. So you're buying pea protein, you're buying almonds, you're buying fiber syrup, et cetera. And we sort of were lucked into taking that in-house, which I think ultimately was the right move, and ultimately was one of the two primary things that massively expanded gross margin. COVID happened. We couldn't get anything. We couldn't get cardboard. We couldn't get almonds, whatever. And so we reverted. We shifted from the turnkey model to owning our supply chain. And so now we were calling the almond supplier. We were calling the cardboard supplier. And as it turns out, you're far more able to negotiate lower rates. You're able to contract around things if you can deliver a certain amount of volume, yada, yada, yada. And so you can cram down, I think, probably at something like 30 to 50% of cost over time. You can save on materials. Then there's the tolling piece, which is pretty simply just like volume. Like, the more volume you run, the lower you can squeeze tolling down. And tolling is the most elastic cost. Like, the co-packer, most of that is margin, right? And so if you negotiate hard with your co-packer and are delivering volume, and are smart about how you produce product, you can cut your tolling down by more than half. So we started making bars for, I think, $1.20 in all-in landed COGS, and it's less than half that today, which is like makes an insanely big difference, right? That is the difference between being not profitable and being profitable. But most people don't do that, by the way. Most people stick with the turnkey model all the way through because they're like, I don't want the administrative burden. I don't want the cash flow burden. Like we have over $10 million of ingredients sitting on our balance sheet today. Right. They're sitting in a warehouse. We own them. That sucks in many ways, right? It sucks for cash flow purposes. And now we have to manage them. And now if our co-packer has a lot of waste, that's on us, not them, because we own the inputs. So it's bad, but why is it? In what ways is it good? It's really good for gross margin, and it's really good for EBITDA.
It's a classic no solutions, only trade-offs thing, right? Where it's like, those are real downsides. And for some businesses, again, probably depending on their goals and the scope of the outcome that they want, it would make sense to say no thanks to the headache. But it makes sense to me also exactly why you would do it. And if there's so much more margin to get back, it's like, especially once the sort of organization is big enough to be able to support the management of that kind of thing. And, you've got more revenue coming in, which can help. Yeah. I mean, it can make the problem harder in other ways, but yeah. Okay. That's super helpful. I love that. I want to move over to, while we're sort of on the subject of product, something I've also heard you talk about that I think is really helpful, which is the idea of product channel fit. IQBAR makes 3 core products right now. And I know from talking to you a minute ago that there's potentially, and obviously as part of business, just more on the way. I don't know if it's variations of the 3 categories you are in right now or new categories or whatever. But can you start by talking big picture about how you think about each product in each category a little bit? Because I think one of the big problems for a lot of e-commerce businesses, I think it's actually a very big problem, is that they have missed how e-commerce as a business model works, and then how changing categories changes the model. The way cash moves through the business, the way you have to staff it, all of these things are different. The way the customer interacts with the product, they're all different based off of channels in ways that really affect, I think, the DNA of the way you operate and the likelihood of success. You should be getting help from other e-commerce operators. I am convinced that one of the great values and one of the great reasons that e-commerce is a good business right now is that there's so much access to good help from other people in the e-commerce journey with you. And you can get access to that community in the best, smoothest possible way that I could think of through Workspace 6. Workspace 6 is fundamentally a Slack community of over 900 7-, 8-, and 9-figure e-commerce operators and executives. So if you are trying to sort through how to run the day-to-day of your business, how to evaluate software, how to evaluate service businesses, what strategies are really working versus what is just noise you hear about on the internet, a community like Workspace 6 is just unparalleled in its value for a couple of reasons. First of all, just very reasonably priced. Okay, $1 for the first month. After that, it's $99 a month, and there is no commitment. So you can really quickly figure out if it's a good community for you by just joining for that first month, okay? Secondly, there are no service providers or software companies like that. I am not allowed to be in Workspace 6 because multiple of my clients are in Workspace 6, and if they want to talk badly about me, they need a place to do it without me hearing about it, and I think that's actually good for them. There should be transparency and candid conversations like that where people can evaluate the ideas that folks like me are telling them, because it's really hard. There's a lot of ideas out there, and getting other good sources from folks is really, really useful. So that's great. And just in general, there is nothing like the kind of help that you can get from other people who are at your stage of the business journey or who are a little bit beyond it and who know exactly the kinds of things you are working through and going through, what's really working, what's not working for their businesses, and how to sort things out. When something like tariffs come into the picture, having a quick way to reach 900 people who are also affected by tariffs and finding the smartest thoughts about those things is really invaluable. It's very hard to not get a return on that investment investment because it is so reasonably priced, and you get one or two things right out of that community, and you will more than pay for your membership. Plus, it's just nice to have people to talk to who understand your world like your regular corporate friends don't. So join Workspace 6 today. It's workspace6.io. Go to workspace6.io to get started today. Really awesome community. Very excited to have them as a sponsor. Go check it out today. So anyway, so talk through a little bit those three categories, and then maybe we can break down what makes them good or bad for different channels.
Yeah. So I guess as a starting point, like my goal was always to exit this business, and D2C businesses are not exitable. Straight up, like period, end of sentence in food. It's not a thing. Not only that, brick and mortar revenue is better in the acquirer's mind than e-commerce revenue. For better or worse, that just is what it is. It's stickier, it's better, its net margin is better, yada, 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 right? Because all of these folks are brick and mortar institutions themselves. That's what they know. If they want to buy you, that's how they're going to supercharge you. You're probably better at e-commerce than they are. Anyway, they're really, really good at brick and mortar. So always the answer for us was omni-channel. Like you have to get to omni-channel, especially in grocery where I think $9+ out of 10 are spent in brick and mortar. So it was always going to be omni-channel. Now it just so happens the $8 out of 10 that are spent online on food is where you should start. So we started online, we started with D2C, and then we layered on Amazon. But ultimately, the goal is always to get to omni-channel. You have to. And there's 10 other reasons outside of getting acquired that's a good thing. Like there's very much a flywheel, but with brick and mortar and online. But even if there wasn't, you're not getting acquired if you're not omni-channel. So it was always important to create a business around a form factor that works in omnichannel, because not all form factors work in omnichannel. Like that just is what it is. And I happen to know that bars did. And so that's why I like the category. That's why I formed a company around it. But what we quickly learned when expanding to hydration and coffee is they're totally different from bars. And so the way people shop it is different.
Can you just walk people through that really fast, what those three categories are, just in case they don't know?
Yeah. So we sell plant protein bars, we sell hydration sachets. It's like, think of it like a liquid IV or an element. And then we sell instant coffee also in a sachet. Rip it, pour it in hot water, stir it, drink it. By the way, bars are bars, but hydration, sometimes it's powdered, sometimes it's ready to drink, like coffee, sometimes it's same deal, powdered, sometimes it's ready to drink, sometimes the ready to drink's cold brew, sometimes it's not. Like there's so many different permutations by form factor and those other categories, which makes it a lot more nuanced and complex from a go-to-market strategy. But let's just take our instances of that, powderized versions of those. Random example, hydration powder just doesn't sell well in conventional grocery. That just is a thing, unless you're liquid IV, right? So it's at the very top of the market. You have such brand affinity, brand recognition, et cetera, that you can kind of move everywhere, including like a gas station. But for everyone else, it's just a massive uphill battle, such that it's like not even worth it, or you just flat out can't succeed there. You're not going to get the velocity to work there. That would be a big problem for me if all I sold was that thing, because I have to get somehow to conventional grocery if I want to build a big omni-channel business that I want to exit. But I think the post you're referencing is what I was saying is like the beauty of a platform is I don't need conventional grocery to work. I just don't need it to. So where does powderized hydration product work really well? Well, it works really well in online, it works really well in the club channel. And you can build a 20, 30, heck, Element has a $350 million business, almost all online. So you can build giant businesses revenue wise. It's just not going to work in every channel. And the same goes for coffee too. So
wait, let's pause there really fast on that, because I want you to unpack a little bit more. Why specifically does powderized hydration work online?
It works online because you can store, like, for all the reasons that like most things work online, you can storytell around it. They're not like when you walk into a brick and mortar retailer, a lot of what the consumer psychology is doing is thinking about consuming it right then and there. So if I'm, let's say, at a gas station and I'm thirsty, and I see liquid IV, and then I see a ready to drink Gatorade, it makes absolutely no sense for me to grab the liquid IV. Like, why would I not just grab the Gatorade? I'm going to open it, drink it right there. Now I'm not thirsty anymore. And so there's an immediacy to brick and mortar that just plain doesn't exist in online.
That is a great point. It's funny how much I did not think about that very specific thing in this distinction, that the very notion that there's a delay between when the order happens and when I get to consume it on e-commerce or online, right? Anywhere like that is a huge factor in the form factor. And I mean, it just makes all the sense.
It's gigantic. Impulse is so important. Look at Chomps, right? I think whatever it is, like 500, 700 million, just a juggernaut.
All the money. Yeah, right.
That is an impulse buy. Like like 9 out of 10 Trader Joe's buyers, that's impulse, right? They weren't premeditated, like, I'm going to go to Trader Joe's and get Chomps. It's impulse, and they can open it and consume one right there while they're waiting to pay. So that's just so powerful. Now go back to e-commerce. It's far more.
Even really fast, compare that to a bag of beef jerky, which is like, there's just like, you maybe aren't going to eat all of it right now. Like the side, like that's an interesting like distinction where it's just way more, like you said, you could literally eat it in line and then just hand them the thing and say, pay for it, like, whereas you're just not going to you're not going to open your bag of beef jerky. It just feels weird. Yeah.
The other thing too is perceived value. So this is kind of like a floofy artistic thing to a degree. I'm sure you could get quantitative about it, but it generally maps to like cubic inches. So if a $1.50 liquid IV pack is standing in front of me, and then a much, much larger, heavier, more voluminous Gatorade is sitting there, my perceived value of that second item is just way bigger, right? This is a problem that things like coffee concentrates have, right? So coffee concentrate sitting on a shelf and it's 16 servings. Well, that's cool in theory, but my perceived value of that is not 16 servings worth. And therefore, I'm not willing to pay for 16 servings. That's a problem, right? So a lot of e-com products have perceived value issues when they go to brick and mortar, right? Again, this is why bars are great. You don't have like any of those problems because you can open it right then and there. You can take a bite. It's one serving. I'm not telling you it's 10 servings. It's one serving, yada, yada, yada. So, but then also within brick and mortar, not all brick and mortar is made equal. So now let's say we're in Costco. Now it's a different calculus, actually, because no one going into Costco is thinking about consuming one unit of anything. It is a bulk. The psychology is all oriented around bulk. Now it's a completely different calculus such that liquid IV can win, because I know I'm buying a month's worth of stuff and the perceived value is different because I'm buying a big bag of it and blah, 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 blah. And so that's why liquid IV has a $500 million a year Costco business. So it's just, you have to intimately understand how the consumer shops your specific form factor in every specific channel to understand how it's gonna work.
Anything about the margin profile one thing I think of with hydration packs, right? Or hydration like sachets, is just cheap to ship too, right? Just like it feels like the value to weight ratio challenge of some e-commerce products is good, and I'm assuming the gross margin on launch, unlike your bars, is better, even if it's not as good as it could be with scale. Both of which would also point towards like the combination of value to weight ratio, probably better on margin on launch. Correct me if that's wrong. And then third, subscription, LTV, those kinds of things that are going to be off the back of a product like that, which also are really powerful in e-com. That those three things together would also, on top of the form factor and that versus a Gatorade type thing that we talked about, those things all feel pretty positive for D2C or for e-com in general.
Yes.
I'm curious if any of those are factors for you.
Absolutely. Powder is the best.
Yeah.
like form factor that there is. It's not just for like
short of pills. I'm taking pills over powder, but
well, yeah,
but
I conflate the two, right? Like
Yeah.
pills
Yeah,
are
yeah,
just powder
yeah,
encapsulated, just like liquid IV is just
yeah,
powder in a sachet. It's all
yeah,
powder, and it's
yeah.
literally made on the same mixing equipment. It's like a tumble blender or
Yeah,
a
of
ribbon
course, yeah,
blender.
yeah,
So the same factory could make pills and powders and sachets and powders and tubs. It's the best form factor. There's just no two ways about it. It is the best. So it's
yeah.
and
This is why there's a lot of really valuable supplement businesses in e-commerce, right?
but there are, of course, downsides. What are the primary downsides of something being the best? Well, it's going to get insanely crowded. I tweeted about this not or like recently. Like, just type in electrolyte powder into Amazon and just notice how many just random ankle biter brands there are. Like it's like endless, and so super competitive. And then no one consumes powder in an impulse context. The same thing we just talked about. So yeah, it's great for XYZ reason, but it's horrible in brick and mortar for the reasons we already talked about. So there is no free lunch, right? But yes, in a D2C context or even an Amazon context, it's the best. You can put it in a hot warehouse. The price per dimensional ratio is excellent. The price per weight ratio is excellent. It's the best. So you just have to like know that with that, all those other big time downsides are coming too.
What about operationally? I want to come back over to the other categories that you're into, particularly how coffee fits into this in a minute. But when you think about that, now you're building a business where you have to have operational muscles for mass retail, omnichannel, for bars, right? As the core channel. And it sounds like you're saying you don't expect hydration to necessarily, like the packs as you have it, to necessarily have mass retail be the core driver of value, despite that there's just still way more food and bev bought in those channels. And really in every category, still, drastically higher in person than anywhere else, as much as eCom has grown over time. So I'm curious about sort of like how you think about if there's anything that has been complex operationally about sort of having a more omni-channel first, or maybe mass retail first product, grocery first product versus hydration, or if it's been fine because you built the ecom muscles early and you just kind of keep giving that to the hydration.
No, it's insanely operational.
I was really hoping you had an easy win there, Will. I was like, like, oh yeah, we cruised. There was no problem.
No, it's insanely complex. The same thing. I mean, just take bars, right? But by the way, the complexity has a bunch of benefits because you don't want to create channel conflict. That's like anyone who has a big omni-channel business will tell you it's a huge headache to have channel conflict. So the complexity is actually by design a little bit. So let's take like bars, right? So we sell 12 packs of bars on DTC, Amazon, Thrive Market, online, etc. Then in grocery, that 12 pack, the top is ripped and we sell eaches or singles. So they're buying one bar. Then in the mass market, or sometimes called big box, Walmart and Target, we sell multi-packs. So it's a 4 count. Then in club, we sell 18 counts. Then in Aldi, it's an entirely like different merchandising setup where it's like a tray. So like every time I say, and then that's a new thing we have to design, spec out, manufacture, kit. Like kitting is insane. We sell 50 million bars plus a year that have to be kitted because they're in a variety pack. So you have to have like an entire kitting strategy. And the implications of kitting for 5 cents a unit versus 3 cents a unit
significant
is $1 million annually.
Right.
So it's just the implications once you get to scale are just so big of being operationally like pretty good and then being operationally excellent. But again, all that sucks operationally, but helps you because there's price matching and value matching going on constantly, in many cases in an automated fashion between all of your channels. So Amazon, as we know, like wants you to have the lowest price possible or you're going to lose the buy box. Costco wants to be X amount of value to the next best value in market, like et cetera, et cetera. I could go down the line. Every single channel has their own needs. So why I say it's by design is having those different packs allows you to thread that needle. Whereas if we were selling one thing, great operationally, horrifically bad in terms of channel conflict.
Yeah. I'm interested to think about how that mentality, I mean, what I hear in that story is just like, you've had a lot of headaches in the last 7 years, because all of those things, I mean, almost everyone else, I'm sure some of them, you set it up and it worked great, but that was probably like 1 out of 10. Like, of all of those problems you solved, I bet like the majority of them at some point, it was like, oh, we tried to do this, and then we had to shift it.
We do everything because something broke, which sounds like we're morons, but like that actually
that's the whole thing. Yeah.
That is what it is. Like,
that's running a business. Yeah. I'm curious if you think back to that for brands that are less complex. Like, I think about the person listening to this podcast who's running a $10 million brand, give or take 5 million, D2C first, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if your brain can get back to that, because that's a good business. A $10 million business, like, nobody should. It's hard to build a $10 million business. Nobody should. It's easy to like look at that compared to the monster that you're building and go like, oh, that's like a small little thing, It's hard. It's really hard.
It was hard to get from 0 to 10, then 10 to 100.
I know you're not saying that, but it's just easy for people to do that. But I'm curious if you take your mind back to that person as much as you can and to that stage of business for you. Obviously, you had this very clear-eyed idea of like scale because of all of the dynamics we've talked about so far. But how do you think about sort of operational excellence applied at those earlier stages versus the like go faster kind of mentality? Or are there any parts of it for these D2C brands that you think like this is the thing people are not doing very well that they should just kill themselves over at those earlier stages of business? That might be too broad of a question, but
I think you have to decide what your KPI is. So for us, the KPI is profitability. And probably most of your listeners got profitable a lot quicker than we did because they played in categories probably with higher gross margins out the gate.
Yep.
But for us, the North Star was how do we get to profitability? And that was mostly a function of volume. And so I don't do OmniChannel because it's fun or for my health. I do it because it helps us get to the volume that flips us profitable, because that was our North Star metric. So I imagine all your listeners have some North Star metric. Maybe it's a certain level of profitability. Maybe they're like, we want to be at, I don't know, 20% EBITDA. Cool. Like, pick that as your North Star. And then there's only two ends of the spectrum in terms of like, you can to expand gross margin to get to that North Star, which is you reduce costs, or like you acquire customers cheaper or retain customers longer or whatever. But it's like a sales side and a cost side. And really you should be yanking on both of them constantly. But because we're talking about operations, like, just understand what your like tipping points and levers are. Usually it's pretty damn boring and straightforward. It's volume, but it also might be we're producing with the wrong manufacturer. I mean, we're on our 4th co-packer. We could have very easily stuck with our 2nd and probably scaled much longer. Why did we move from our 2nd to our 3rd and then our 3rd to our 4th? Because we knew that would unlock new gross margin, among other things. There's generally that comes with added quality and 10 other good things. But let's say it was all else equal, we would do it just to expand 10 points of gross margin. So it's not just volume. It's also your partnerships, how you negotiate, how you contract on items. Like, random example, we save, I think it's up to 5 cents a unit. If I run the same SKU, like, let's say I run one SKU for 100,000 units, that's going to cost me X. If I run that same SKU for 5 million units, that's going to cost me X minus 5 cents per unit. So just running the same thing longer, I saved a massive amount of cost. And so that comes down to like operational planning, demand planning. Ultimately, I would have made those same 5 million units. I would have done it in like a chunkier, spread out way. But because I did it all at once, but because I had really good demand planning models and things like that, I knew that I could make it all at once and I could save the 5 cents. So it's just like rearranging the chess pieces. You're still doing the same thing, but you're stripping cost out along the way. And then there's, again, the boring thing of just make more stuff. You're going to strip cost out.
Do you think, tell me if you agree with this. I have a theory that supply chains in D2C are the most under-optimized part of most D2C businesses, because people come. I think there's a couple reasons for it. One of them is that people aren't supply chain. That's not why they got into it, right? They don't have any expertise around that, so they don't know what they don't know. I mean, I certainly didn't when I ran businesses, and they're product or marketing people, or just entrepreneurs in general. And so they're like, that's what brought them there. And then secondly, I would just say, like, in the last however long, there's just been a big growth in marketing related and finance related content for D2C brands, so that people can sort of level up their game in both those places. There's still plenty of leveling up to be done, but that content feels pretty widely available to me, like in a way that it wasn't when I certainly, I've been in eCom for 10 or 11 years now or whatever. And so much better now. There's so much more information now. Supply chain still feels like a place where, as you are rattling off some of the things that you guys have done and learned along the way, where I think maybe people are going to go like, what's he talking about? Like, there's just still a lot of question marks. I don't know. I'm
no, I agree. I think
evaluate that theory.
There's a few things there. Number one, you're right. They don't like it. They didn't get into it because, to be an operations person. Right. Number two, they don't know what levers to pull. So even if they did like it, they don't know what to do because there's no course on this. Yes. And then number three would be, a reason someone wouldn't focus on it would be, it's just not going to move the needle much for them, right? So in the Sean and Ridge example, if Sean could spend a ton of time either acquiring a customer for $20 less or spend it, reducing his cost from $5 to $4.90, he should do the former, not the latter. Yeah, because COGS is really not going to move them in. So it's those three things. But of course, even Sean would say, I'd rather make this for $4.90 versus $5, right? So it's obviously objectively better. So I think it's more of the first two things. They don't want to do it and they don't know how to do it.
Yeah. I do think, though, when brands are smaller, there is a reality that sometimes number three is true in their businesses too. When you talk about saving 5 cents on something, that 5 cents doesn't matter to a $10 million brand, really. It matters if they can save $5 or maybe $3 or $2. I have a brand, for example, it's like a $10 million brand that took a product of theirs that was part of it, already a really high margin business, but they got a core product from $5 to $2. No customer has ever said a single word about being worse. So they did it while maintaining product quality just fine. And that's a really big win, right? I mean, even though it's probably 3% of their AOV or something like that, that's a lot, over the course of a whole year. And it's a few $100,000 ultimately, So,
and if they want to go omni-channel, it's going to get really, 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 really important that they move from $5 to $2.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So it sets them up for the long term as well. But that's a big win. I mean, that means they cut their COGS by 60%, So it's like, that's pretty hard to find that kind of a win. Although, because I think they're so under optimized, I actually think there's more of those out there for people than they realize that there are, by hammering away at it, and it's more accessible, but it's just requires some time and effort, and actually, honest to goodness, sometimes it's not actually the best place to spend your time next if you're at 10 million.
1,000%. We didn't spend our time on this until we got to tens of millions of units. Because what are your priority? What's your priority stack? Priority stack number one is like product market fit. Is this even a good idea? Do people want this thing? Which maybe is less of a thing if you're, again, like selling like more of a drop shipper mentality or whatever. And you're just like, of course people want it. I just want to be better at delivering it. But for anyone creating new stuff, innovative stuff, priority number one is, does anyone want this? And how big is the market? And how big can the market become? Then once you're like, cool, the market wants it. The next thing is, how do I get to volume? And the third thing is, once I get to volume, how do I twist 10 dials to like leverage the volume to squeeze cost out? Because you can't squeeze cost out even if you have 10 good ideas until you get to volume. It's just not, that's right. No supplier gives a crap because you're not giving them a lot of volume. So yeah, you're right. It is the third on that rung. Yeah. Yeah. There are just sometimes also at the same time, like I said, a 60% win for a business. I think there's more things like that than people realize at some phases because their business is so under optimized, at times. So anyway, okay, let's move just for a little bit also over to the coffee product as well, instant coffee. I mean, when you're describing it, it sounds to me more like it fits with the hydration pack.
in terms of some of the dynamics of it. You know, you don't necessarily have it right now. There's like some things in the way of you drinking it. It's certainly different than grabbing a pre-made Starbucks beverage off the shelf in the gas station or something like that. You know, like, so any differences with coffee and the way you're thinking about that versus hydration packs, or is it pretty similar to that dynamic?
It's similar. I mean, obviously, it's the same form factor, right? And you can't consume it right then and there. So all those same dynamics apply. Of like, you know, if there's a Starbucks Frappuccino that I could drink, and this is a powder, like same dynamics apply. The impulse piece goes out the door when you're in powder. But coffee, I would say, actually is quite a bit even more nuanced than electrolytes. Like electrolytes is very much a functional thing. It's like, I want to get sodium and potassium in my body, because when I sweat, like I lose those, and it's like really kind of exercise forward, and it's just very functional focus. Coffee is the opposite. I mean, there is the functional benefit of, oh, I'm caffeinated and more alert and whatnot, but it's a far more like emotional, romantic, habitual thing. Like everyone, like most people wake up and they make coffee, and that's like a sacred 5 or 10 minutes of their morning every morning, right? And so you just have to be super delicate about that, and you have to pick your lane incredibly intentionally. And so do you want to, because like hydration, it's like premium versus non-premium, it's all the same. Like sodium is sodium is sodium, whereas coffee, there's beans from Ethiopia, there's beans from Hawaii, there's beans from Kenya, like where the bean comes from, how it's roasted, how some people like it. Also, preferences have a much wider spectrum. So some people like it bitter, some people like it smooth, some people add cream, some people don't. So you have so many more consumer permutations to consider. But ultimately, the market is so damn big that my opinion is you should just pick a lane and just win at that lane. So for us, the lane is cost effective, functional, and good tasting. Like if we check, we're going to build a giant business. We are not trying to be premium. We're trying to be those three things. And we also like have stumbled a bunch, and like that wasn't how we started necessarily. We just have taken feedback and iterated into that. But you know, you could build. We could have said no. We want to be super premium and built the same profile of business. It just, we picked that lane because ultimately we think the most volume lives there, and we're a volume first business. And so all the same principles of unit volume being that key metric apply. But that's nascent. I mean, coffee's like a $3 or $4 million business. So it's relative to our other lines, it's tiny.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting towards the end of our time, so I want to ask one more highly specific question to you that you may, or I haven't seen if you've put any content on this, but I'm really curious about how you have changed your mentality about marketing measurement as your business has gone from e-commerce to omnichannel. I bring it up just because it's such a mind shift, and something that I see a lot of brands really struggle with in that shift. And I have heard a comment recently. I'll hold it back for a second. see what you want to say first. But that had made me think about it a little bit. So I'm just curious how you have thought about the deployment of ad dollars as the distribution and demand capture of your business has changed, and measurement for that.
Totally. I mean, and my wife would answer this question way more astutely than I am, because she manages this part of the business. But I mean, we're not like unique in that LTV to CAC is kind of like is just as important for us as it is for everyone else. And ultimately we need to, and of course, you know, that LTV is on a profit basis, not a revenue basis. Like we have to be making EBITDA on that exchange. Like that is how we think about things. And we don't do this internally. We're probably different than a lot of your listeners in that too, that in-house is, we have less than 10 W-2s. So including our paid media purchasing, that's outsourced to an agency. But you know, we advertise via Meta. We do, you know, obviously email marketing is a big component of our business. We do a lot of podcast. We've layered on brand marketing in a big way recently. So we do a ton of podcast advertising. We're dipping our toes in out of home. But if I look at like the heat map of where we spend most our dollars on online, it's Amazon keyword bidding. Like,
Yep.
that is where most of our dollars go to.
Yeah. When you guys, I mean, I assume in your early days before you were in mass retail or grocery or any of those places, like something like that, you started DTC only, isn't correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to build the foundation. That's what I thought. Once you enter into, again, these sort of huge grocery and club and big box retailers, did that change the way you guys thought about how you measured the value of your ad spend? Because, this is a thing, again, what a lot of people do when they do this is they go spend a bunch of money and then there's way better places for customers to buy than online. And so they therefore cannot measure everything on a D2C conversion basis or something on their Meta Ads account or whatever it is. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but if you do,
it's a great question. Again, my wife would answer it much better than I would.
Sure.
But we don't, yes, I'm almost certain we do bake in some sort of
halo effect
to our metrics, because we know for a fact that people are seeing ads and then buying in store. The inverse is also true, by the way. People are seeing us in store and then buying us online. And by the way, OmniChannel makes all your metrics better, because being on shelf is a free Facebook ad, right? Like, and then and you're getting tens of thousands of free impressions daily. But no, I mean, I think we still think of things in their own vacuum, even though they're not, even though they're all interdependent and interrelated. We still think of things in a vacuum. So we still are, the LTV to CAC still has to be, whatever our latest target is, 2+ on D2C, irrespective of the fact that we know there's leakage to brick and mortar.
Yeah.
But it is like, what's like the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is EBITDA. Like we are managing marketing spend as it relates to like total revenue and EBITDA at the end of the day, especially as we get more and more into the brand marketing stuff and podcast stuff. We're just allocating more budget, and we know it's harder to measure, and we're okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. Just for a last question here, do you, most entrepreneurs I talk to, between content they're creating and content they're consuming and things that are happening every day in their business, have something that's just rolling around their mind somewhere that they've been sort of hot on recently, or that's sort of just bubbling up in their brains or something like that? If there's anything like that, I just always like to ask people, whether it's a highly tactical piece of advice or something like that, is there anything that's sort of most top of mind for you that we didn't get to in this conversation that you think would be interesting to people or help people? If not, that's okay too. But.
I mean, I would say just top of mind stuff is obviously tariffs is top of everyone's mind. But this comes back to like how much expertise have you built in your supply chain and operations and manufacturing and storage and fulfillment? How much expertise do you have around that? Because I think the tariff thing happens, and I think a lot of people who have very low expertise there are like, I'm fucked, right? Like because I don't know that stuff, and now my supplier is telling me it's 50% more expensive, and there's not much I can do because I haven't built that muscle. I think we're the opposite of that. We think a lot about all that stuff, and so when things happen like tariffs, which obviously don't happen often, it's kind of a black swan event, but it did happen. So when things happen, we don't take that at face value. There are absolutely ways to get really smart and really creative. It's like the thing of running one bar for 100,000 units versus 5 million units. At the end of both scenarios, you made 5 million units. Just one scenario, you did it at way less cost. The same thing is true for supply chain. Like there are so many ways to get creative around your supply chain to mitigate the impact of things like tariffs. Again, it's highly contextual. Where are you sourcing stuff from, et cetera, et cetera. But that's like, I wish I had a better like silver bullet takeaway from that, other than the fact that,
well,
you just have to be able to respond appropriately to crazy shit that happens. You have to have built the muscle in the first place.
And so this actually fits with one of my theories about this. I'm an optimistic guy, arguably too optimistic about some of these things. But you know, one of my theories is that tariffs. Somebody asked at one point, maybe it was Taylor Holiday, like, what's the bull case for tariffs in e-commerce? Like, how does this go well for people? And look, I'm not going to say that like it's good. It's good that your products are getting more expensive and that you have to go rejigger your supply chain. It's a huge job. It's a pain. It's going to obviously with reduction of tariffs is better and for brands and all that. And for some people, especially at some of the higher numbers, it was a potentially extinction event. So I don't want to gloss over that, right? But one potential value of it is, to the point of a lot of this conversation, to the thing you just said, it can be for some a forcing function to develop the muscles that you just described, that essentially suddenly you must go throw yourself into this part of the business that, as we discussed earlier, a lot of people have not, for any number of reasons, really taken seriously. And if that happens, the net result in the long term, especially with a reduction in tariffs now and some of those things, could be a much more resilient business. Like, I just know I'm starting a brand right now on the side. We immediately went and sourced a backup supplier in Vietnam, getting all the way through the sampling phase. I think we'll still probably order from China for the most expensive part of our COGS to start, but we are going to have a backup sample and have it ready to go. And we will now launch with a backup supplier on hand, ready to go in case anything else happens. And that's a big deal, and maybe probably go explore some more and see if we can solve some more problems. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing for our business, for our opportunity to do it. And I think it's possible that that's the case for more brands out there that have started to go like, wait a minute, I've never looked in any countries but China. What else is even out there? And maybe there's opportunities for all kinds of reasons. And maybe over here, there's slightly worse unit costs, but better terms. And that could be really important if I bootstrap it, whatever. So there's all these trade-offs and all those things that I think you're right about. All right, Will, thanks so much. I appreciate your time a lot. People should follow you on X. They should follow you on LinkedIn in particular. You are regularly producing content about all of the things that you are doing. The links for both of those are in the description or the show notes of this episode, wherever you're watching or listening to it. I continue to think that when somebody on here who's going to do 9 figures at a massive profit will come on for an hour of your time for free for people and share what you are learning along the way is one of the great gifts and one of the reasons to be optimistic about e-commerce businesses right now is because these conversations happen. So thanks so much for your time on it and for helping people run their businesses better.
Thanks for having me.
Will is a monster. I loved that conversation. You can just hear the intelligence that he brings to every one of his answers. Do reach out to me if you have any thoughts or questions or anything like that at podcast@ajfgrowth.com. I would love to hear your response to that episode. It was really helpful for me. Of course, that was a Profit Monsters episode, and therefore there are other Profit Monsters episodes like that you can get. I've actually created now a Profit Monsters playlist specifically, so you can find that on my YouTube page, but also just subscribe to my show because I've got a lot of other great conversations like that that are talking with folks who really understand what they're talking about, who are far along the journey like Will is, and who are passing that information back to you. So if you like that episode, you will just like my show in general. Subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. You can also reach out to me on X at Andrew J. Ferris. Love to do that, and sign up for my newsletter at ajfgrowth.com. That will also get you access to my 4 free essential e-commerce resources. That's a cohort forecasting guide. That's my weekly performance tracker that I actually use with my clients. All of them I use actually with my clients. So if you want that stuff, just drop your email address in the pop-up or in the footer. Great episodes coming very soon, including a monster episode with Taylor Holiday, our next random show episode, one of those longer ones where we sat and talked about all manner of things, including whether or not e-commerce is a good business. And I've got Sam Mendelson, who's running 3 e-commerce businesses, a whole bunch of other stuff all at the same time. I've got Bill D'Alessandro talking about the sale of Natural Dog Co., Bear Hanlon talking about the monster business that is Born Primitive. Just all kinds of really good interviews lined up. You're going to like it. Subscribe, like I said, wherever you're watching or listening so you don't miss out on those. Thanks so much to Will. Thank you for watching or listening. Talk to you next time.